think it's worth reminding ourselves what ministers said about this Manchester airport incident before the second bit of footage emerged showing what really happened. And of course, now Mohammed Ammars has been convicted on counts 1, 3 and 4. And what ministers have not said since the conclusion of this trial, all but for ground 2. And of course, lots of questions flow the conclusion of that trial. Of course, remembering that the jury were unable to reach a verdict on count 2. Now, for obvious reasons, I won't say much about count 2 because the CPS are looking to seek a retrial against Mohammed Ammars and Mohammed Ammars on count 2. So I'll not be addressing that, but what I can address are some of the questions that have popped up throughout this trial, which was 3 weeks long, one of which is, why was it so long? And one of them was, it paused for legal arguments. What possibly could that have been? Now, for the avoidance of doubt, I don't know what that was, but I can give you an idea of what that was and why it caused a delay or would have caused a delay, and a few other things as well. First of all, let's go to this footage because many of you might disagree with this being deleted. You see, this was posted by Lucy Powell on the 25th of July, which I understand was before the second bit of footage emerged from Manchester Evening News, and this was since deleted. But just to remind ourselves of what it was and what she said, I mean, it's not as if it's any secret because she said it in Parliament, and it was a video of her speaking in Parliament that she posted on her X profile, but then later deleted. But the video of her in Parliament was as follows, and she says, and she posted here, "I want to address the truly shocking footage of an incident at Manchester Airport. Watch below my full statement." Now, of course, that was in respect of the original snippet of footage, which, if that's all you saw, gave you a bit of a misleading view. Have a listen to this. Let's remind ourselves. As she spoke in Parliament about it, her post said as follows: "I want to address the truly shocking footage of an incident at Manchester Airport. Watch below my full statement." And that has now been deleted, but I do have the video. So again, this is what she said in Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, I also want to address the truly shocking footage of an incident at Manchester Airport we've seen. It's right that Greater Manchester Police has referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct, given the wide concern of this issue. Greater Manchester Police has said that the officer involved has been immediately suspended from all duties, and a referral has now been made to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. I will make sure that the Home Secretary has heard his question today and is in touch with him at the earliest opportunity to discuss it further.
And in my previous video, I went through the statement for the IOPC there as well. I will also talk about my personal views on the IOPC investigation into those police officers, but I'll probably do that on my other channel, Off the Record, which is fast approaching 100,000 subscribers. So please do subscribe to it down below. You'll get my personal views on that. So first of all, about that statement by Lucy Powell in Parliament, my view is that I think that was a bit premature and she probably shouldn't have said that. It should have been much more neutral, if anything at all. If anything, just that she was aware of it and that it was being looked at, but no further comment, because obviously most of the nation would have heard her statement. But it probably seems that she agrees with that in retrospect because she's deleted the post. Now, I'm not going to profess to speak for her, but having deleted it might suggest that she no longer agrees with it. Now, we can all make mistakes and we can all look retrospectively and think that we shouldn't have said something. That's all fine. But at least you might then expect something to be said later on, such as after the conclusion of this trial and this guy has been convicted on counts 1, 3 and 4. But no, there is nothing further from Lucy Powell here. This is her latest feed, and there is no post here at all that I can see regarding this trial. The latest posts are just reposts of other things, nothing at all to do with the conclusion of this trial. Moving on to what the Home Office said, which I've covered in other videos, but again, this was July the 25th last year. This was a statement released by the Home Office by Yvette Cooper, again, in my opinion, in my respectful opinion, saying a little bit too much, not neutral enough in my view, saying that she shares the deep concern surrounding the video and understand the widespread distress it will have caused, etc. I think in fairness, what that should have said is we are aware of this video and it's under investigation, and nobody should draw any conclusions from it until it's been investigated. But just simply by saying that They've taken urgent steps in response to it. They share the deep concern and widespread distress, etc., welcoming Greater Manchester Police work, and that the public expect the highest standards from those in charge, all of which indicating that the police had done something wrong. Now, of course, at least in respect of the counts upon which the jury reached a verdict, the police ostensibly were absolutely correct on this occasion, because he's now been convicted of those charges. Just an aside for a moment for a really scary story. A fellow YouTuber of mine with several 100,000 subscribers recently lost his whole channel and account for several days to hackers. Now, you might say, have a secure password, have two-factor authentication, have a backup email address, all of which you should have, but none of which will completely protect you from session hijacking. A session is your browser's active connection and logins with your email, Facebook, your bank, and so on. And that session is stored in a file. A session hijack is where they steal that file along with all the active logins. Session hijacking can happen in a number of ways. First of all, you could connect to an insecure network, such as a local coffee shop or a supermarket that may have been compromised. Session fixation, they trick your machine to use a session ID they've created. Brute force, where they just use a whole series of different combinations. Cross-site scripting, where you visit a dangerous website and it runs a script to steal your session ID. Or malware, which is where they make you download some kind of software disguised as something else. One of the common ones is a PDF. They might say they're sending you a quote or sending you a cooperation agreement or whatever. And it looks like a PDF, but in fact it's got a script behind it. And obviously that made me think, well, what if someone tried to do that to me? But then I was genuinely reassured that I used NordVPN, and I have done for many years, way back before they were a partner to my channel. I paid for it with my own money. I've used it ever since, and it gives me an anonymous IP address. It checks websites and downloads before I connect to them. Nothing is 100% foolproof, of course, but knowing this is going to check with its threat protection the websites that I visit, the downloads to check whether they are malicious scripts and so on. And every now and again I have clicked a link which looked completely genuine, but Nord has said this looks a little bit suspicious. So I've stayed on the side of caution and not proceeded to that website. And I always now thinking about that story, did this save me from losing my entire account? Not just my YouTube channel, but my Google account, my Facebook logins, all those kind of things. This has probably saved me and I don't even know it. And of course, as NordVPN is a partner to my channel, I get you a great discount, which is 4 months extra free on top of any deal that they run, along with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can see it in action, but you've got that peace of mind if you choose to change your mind. But you won't, because for less than the price of a cup of coffee, the peace of mind that you have, that I now have and have been reinforced over these years, and hearing such horror stories of people that I know, this is just a no-brainer. So 4 months extra free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Use the code BBB. It's on screen. It's in the description below. It is absolutely a no-brainer. For that peace of mind and the story that I've just heard, use code BBB for 4 months extra free. Use it. Check out the peace of mind that you feel, and you can always change your mind, but I don't think you will. So thank you to NordVPN, not just for sponsoring this video, but for keeping me and my channel safe. And of course, all of you guys. So please do check them out. But again, you might expect an update following the conclusion of that trial from Yvette Cooper from the Home Office, but no, it would seem, again, it appears that there is nothing from Yvette Cooper following the conclusion of this trial, yet at least. The latest post was from the 29th, and the latest reply, again from the 29th. And the latest post from the Home Office, apart from a pinned comment here, this one about protecting the public from ransomware. And the next post from the Home Office was a retweet from the National Crime Agency. And then the one before that was to do with landmark agreements with channel crossings and so on, which I'll come to in another video. So nothing else from the Home Office either, by the looks of it, nor by Yvette Cooper. But if you look back through various feeds, you'll see lots of comments and statements and videos and snippets about the civil unrest, violent disorder, etc., all of which is wrong, I agree, but lots of posts and comments about that, but nothing about this attack upon our police officers at the airport in this incident for which Mohammed Ammars has now been convicted. Likewise, as you might have expected, nothing from Keir Starmer either. Now, of course, he's going to be a busy man, but you'd think that one of his team or dictating a message or whatever could have sent something out in support of the police officers who it is now confirmed were assaulted during this attack at Manchester Airport, but nothing from Keir Starmer. So a couple of these, one about the NHS, one about the pinned comment at the top there, one about small business owners, really bizarre comment here. I will discuss that and everything to do with it on my money channel, as I like to call it, my Daniel Shensmith channel. I'll link that below as well. Yes, I enjoy YouTube. Yes, I've got several channels. Yes, I like to talk. I'm a barrister. I like to talk. So I've turned it to YouTube and to help people with lots of different things. So I enjoy that. But nothing from Keir Starmer about the conclusion of this trial in support of our police officers, which I might have expected. So some questions that have popped up, one of which there was a delay. I think it was the whole day, if not most of the day, was delayed for legal argument. And then people were wondering what's going on here. Now, the truth is, I don't know what that legal argument was, but I can tell you what kinds of arguments are in the absence of the jury, because obviously the jury was sent out for that. Now, the jury is not there to hear legal arguments, because let me give you an example. If there was a legal argument over whether a certain bit of evidence was admissible, then of course the jury can't hear that, because they can't hear the argument and then not know about the evidence later if they're not supposed to hear about the evidence. So the legal argument might be that it's unfair to have a certain bit of evidence presented to the jury, and so those legal arguments are made before the judge. In the absence of the jury, judge rules on it. It's either in or it's out, and if it's in, jury will come back in, none the wiser, no clue what the legal argument was about, and either hear the evidence or not. Sometimes that might be in the middle of a cross-examination. If some question has been posed which risks some kind of prejudice or risks bringing in evidence that is not supposed to be presented to the jury or in earshot of the jury, and so judge might then stop immediately, send the jury out, have the legal argument about why they're discussing this bit of evidence, and then once that's resolved, bring the jury back in again. Another example, now this is somewhat routine, is a submission of no case to answer. Now, this is sometimes made purely for the principle of appeal, because if at the end of the prosecution case they make a submission of no case to answer, which means on the facts they haven't presented enough evidence to convict the person of that offence charged, then the case could be dismissed at that point, sometimes referred to a halfway submission. But it is a submission of no case to answer, so even before the defence case begins, so after the close of the prosecution case, and that again is made in the absence of the jury. I have no information as to whether that was the case or not, and however unmeritorious that might have been, it might still be an argument that they make, because if it's refused, then they can sometimes look at that as a route of appeal. Unlikely, but possible. So those are the kind of arguments that might be made in the absence of the jury that can take several hours, etc., because there's legal arguments back and forth and so on. Another question was about Mohammed Ahmad. What happens with him? Well, I understand that the CPS are seeking a retrial on count 2, which involves him and Mohammed Ahmad. So that is all I can say about that. So the question that I can answer is, someone has asked about, well, what about double jeopardy? Surely you can't be tried for the same crime twice. Now, this is where the principle of no verdict comes in, because if the jury have failed to reach a verdict, it's essentially an unsuccessful trial, and the CPS can seek to try that person again. So this is what most people will know as a hung jury. They are unable to reach a verdict. So it doesn't mean they're guilty, it doesn't mean they're not guilty, it doesn't mean anything. It just means they were unable to reach a verdict on that particular charge. So the CPS then are at liberty, as they chose in this case, to seek a retrial. And there's technically no legal bar to how many retrials they can have on account if the jury consistently failed to reach a verdict. Although there is a presumption against a third trial. So if the CPS seek a second trial and the jury is still unable to reach a verdict, then typically they will not seek a third trial of the same defendant on the same charge. But that is not the same as being acquitted. And so an actual verdict is simply this: they are either found guilty or not guilty. And there's a subtle legal distinction between not guilty and innocent, because it's not a finding of innocence. In fact, there's a very interesting point and quirk of law that crosses from the criminal sphere to the civil sphere. Because in the civil courts, you could allege that a person found not guilty was actually guilty, because it's a lower standard of proof. You see, in the criminal courts, it is beyond a reasonable doubt, or so that the jury is sure that this happened. And in the civil courts, it's just on the balance of probabilities. So you can argue in the civil courts that on the balance of probabilities, the mere fact that they were prosecuted and went through a full trial, notwithstanding they may have been found not guilty, you can assert that they are in fact guilty in the civil courts because it's on a lower standard of proof. That might be the case, for example, for criminal damage, where they might be found not guilty for criminal damage because there's a reasonable doubt that they may not have done so. But in the civil courts, you can say, well, it's reasonably sure that they did it, and therefore you can seek the damages against them. It's a different standard of proof in the civil courts. So guilty and not guilty, but not guilty is not quite the same as innocent. I think I've done a video on this before. I'm sure my learned friend Al of Art of Law, I will now tag him below. I'm sure he's done a video on that before. If I find it, I'll link it, but just go and have a root through. I'm sure I've done one. I'm sure he's done one, but there's a subtle distinction between not guilty and innocent. So that answers that question. Someone else asked about, again, the comparison between the sentence that I've estimated here. Now, at the time of recording, there's no sentence. So if there is, by the time I've finished recording, so be it. But at the time of recording this, there's no sentence passed. And obviously people have compared my estimated starting point of 2.5, 3 years with Lucy Connolly. Now, this is where I might have a bit of a beef with sentencing guidelines because they are very different offences. So you cannot compare the two. It'll be a false comparison. And if they're compared together, it's a false equivalence because you just cannot compare the two together. They're completely different offences, albeit one is the physical use of violence and another one is just online incitement of violence. They are very different, but in Lucy Connolly's case, it was treated very seriously because there was serious civil disorder, violent disorder around the country. And so her post at that time was taken very seriously, particularly because she signed a false statement with it as well. So that was treated very seriously, but the main point is the sentencing guidelines are very, very different in either of those cases. And so either way, the judges are bound to follow these sentencing guidelines. If they don't, then it will be open to appeal and it might be overturned anyway or reduced or whatever. So judges will tend to follow these guidelines. If you have an issue with the sentences, I would urge that it is the guidelines that you look to first and not the judges. A lot of people are quick to say that the judges are too lenient or too whatever, but that's really not always the case. Not saying it doesn't happen. Everybody will have a slight leaning of their own personal judgment, and that's what we trust the judges to do, but they need to follow the guidelines. But either way, there's one or two questions I thought I would address, and of course the previous comments by ministers and lack of comments thereafter. If you want my personal views about the police officers, etc., then do check out my Off the Record channel below. And about the business stuff, check out my money channel, Daniel Shensmith, link below. And anything that doesn't quite fit in any one of those, we've got black belt secrets to fall back on, which I am going to put some more martial arts stuff on there as well, because over the years I've picked up all sorts of injuries and I've been on and off training and all that sort of stuff. And at one point I couldn't even really travel around properly because I broke the bottom disc in my spine, L5 to S1. The contents spilled into the spinal canal and I could barely walk. So that's why a lot of my time I've spent at the desk doing various type of desk-based business, including YouTube, which is one reason I ended up on here so much. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing and supporting me over the years. I love to receive your emails, read your comments, and I'm really grateful to have you here with me. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.